Hi there, and welcome to Shapers, Makers, Builders, and Breakers. I am your podcast host today, Real Milan. Shapers is a podcast show that brings you African leadership stories in all spheres of society, where we interview exceptional individuals telling us their story. This podcast is brought to you by Exeo Capital. Exeo Capital is a leading alternative private equity fund manager that through its 15-year history have focused on investing in African businesses with purpose and impact. Exeo covers the whole of the African continent with investment teams based in Cape Town, South Africa and Nairobi, Kenya, currently managing investments in 9 African countries. The core investment thesis revolves around partnering with exceptional businesses and their teams that have the ability to impact Africa in the decades to come. Exeo does this through providing growth capital to these businesses, but more than that, leveraging a partnership ethos with the companies they invest in. For more information, please have a look at their website, www.exeocapital.com. That is www.exeocapital.com. So my guest today is somebody that has definitely appeared on most South Africans' radar screens, specifically I think around the World Cup, not only the radar screen, on the TV screen. And my guest today is Rachel Kolisi, wife of Siya Kolisi. She's a businesswoman. She's in her own right. She's doing great humanitarian work. She's a great, positive, and wholesome social media influencer, which is something you don't find a lot either. And having 2 teenage girls, I can attest to that. She's a mother to 4 beautiful children. She is a former fitness instructor. She's involved in marketing and events, and the list goes on and on and on. And then in her spare time, she sort of keeps Siya on the straight and narrow. So thank you for that. Probably not an easy task in itself. And in recent years, you've been carving out your own path and your own career and influence around the work you're doing through the Kolisi Foundation, and we're going to have a chat about that. So, Rachel, welcome to Shapers, Makers, Builders, and Breakers. Good to have the chat to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I think it's a necessary conversation, necessary content to have in a in a world that's become, for lack of better words, quite shallow. And it's good to be here.
Yeah. So let's start a little bit with your background. It's always just good to have an idea of what shaped you, where you, in the chat we had before the podcast, we now realize we grew up probably 60 Ks from each other. So I'm a little bit older than you, so definitely not around the same time, but in the Eastern Cape. But give us a bit of a rundown of just your formative years, where you grew up, how you got to the point where you sort of started carving your own path.
Yeah, so I was born in Mafeking and lived in Eugene, Oregon for a few years, as a toddler, and then grew up most of my, childhood years and teens, all the way up until the end of school in Grahamstown in the Eastern Cape. It's a lot of people don't know where it is. It's somewhere between East London and Gqeberha, formerly known as Port Elizabeth, and it's a very small town. It's got one of the highest alcohol consumptions in the world because that's where Rhodes University is based.
University, I think that skews it a little bit, but yes, okay.
But it was a beautiful time in my life. I had a small community, and really enjoyed living there. And then from there I moved to Somerset West, where I became a bartender and waitress. I picked up jobs, odds and sods, wherever I could, but I didn't have the opportunity to study. One, because my parents had 5 kids and it was just, not affordable. And also because I just didn't have the academics that, would have gotten me into a university on a bursary. So try to figure out another way.
Okay. And that was sort of at the age of what, 18, 20? So when you came down to Cape Town.
Yeah, so 18 straight after matric. So 2008, probably December time. Yeah, and then 19 was a big year.
Okay, and from there, so once you became an adult, so what were the things that sort of put you on the path that led you here? What were the things that happened? I mean, I know there's fitness instructor here as part of your CV. So how did it go from
It's
there?
hard to, yeah, I think it's hard to pinpoint, certain things that have happened. I think life just happens, whether we like it or not. And I think that we as individuals just have an opportunity to make decisions along the way. And I think it was in my, actually when I was around 2021, I remember I was bartending at the time, and I was just reflecting on the fact that some of the decisions I was making were not getting me to where I wanted to be. So I had this dream of, being a successful businesswoman, having a beautiful home, a healthy family, a wholesome family. But I was drinking and jolling and, just the decisions I was making in, my early 20s were not getting me to the goal that I was, hoping to achieve, and where I wanted to land up later in life. And I think that made me realize that I had two different paths that I could go down. One very likely will get me where I want to get to, and the other will land me in a position where it's going to look completely different. So, yeah, early 20s, there was a lot of reflection time, and I started making a lot of big decisions for myself to start making um, some healthy decisions. And I became I started working as a receptionist for a marketing company in Cape Town, and I was promoted quite quickly within that company, and became the office manager and events manager in Cape Town for them. And then I met Siya.
Okay, we're going to dig into that a little bit, but if you just have to reflect back on your life, so you come from a big family, so and then the choices you had to start making it sounds like at a fairly early age. You sort of got to a crossroads. What would you credit, or who would you credit in terms of providing you with sort of that true north in terms of where you and how you made decisions?
Yeah, so I think for me, there's no way that I couldn't allow. My faith has played a massive role in the human being that I am today. And, from a very young age, it's how I was raised, with a very strong faith. And um, I truly believe that every human being, now more than ever, it's so important to have some kind of faith base or spiritual attachment, whatever that looks like for you. Um, but for me, it was just believing that Jesus had a plan for my life, and he had written the story for my life, and trusting that the decisions that I was making along the way were on par with the plan that he had for me. So definitely my faith has played a massive role. um, but I did an interview recently on Women's Day, and they were International Women's Day, and they were asking, um, if I had to explain myself in 3 words, what would it be? And I remember just thinking, oh, it's so hard to think of words. But um, after thinking about that a little bit more, I think definitely for me, I'm very resilient. I'm an extremely resilient person. So I'm happy to face challenges. In fact, I sometimes invite challenges. I'm happy for people to underestimate me. Um, but I really do have a strong resilience. And I think that that's played a massive role in, especially in those years where it was very complicated and very challenging, not just with work, but emotionally, like family stuff we had going on. And just continuing to make the decision to get up and just keep going and just keep going. Like, there will be seasons that are challenging, there will be seasons that are really hard, but allow yourself rest, allow yourself time to heal, or whatever that looks like. But don't sit there. Don't sit in
You're
in
not
a
both.
struggle and accept that to be your life. Like, get up and go again.
No, so it's interesting. So just to dig into your faith a little bit. So our previous podcast was with Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, and
Yeah.
faith, obviously, in his life is playing a massive role in how what guides him, and he shared his experience with us. So if we dig a little bit into sort of how you came to faith, I mean, and was it from an early age? Did this crossroad that you were at, did that drive you to that, or was it given to you through your upbringing? So how did that come about?
Yeah, just to say, Dr. Soliman, I've been so privileged to spend quite a bit of time with him, recently over the past couple of months, and what an incredible human being he is, and just the story he has, and also just completely that the dream of Gift of the Givers was based off of, his faith and something that he believed was shown to him, which is, I mean, it's such a special story. Um, you know, So I was raised as a Christian. I went to Christian schools. My family, were Christians. Um, but through my parents' divorce, there was in my opinion, quite an injustice done by the church. Getting quite involved in the church that we were attending at the time in Grahamstown, getting quite involved in my parents' divorce and separation, and kind of taking sides um, and actually just, I don't know, just almost taking some verses out of the Bible and trying to address it in a way that I don't believe that God had ever intended, his word to be used. And I remember feeling very disheartened and very hurt by the church, because I felt like they played a part in almost just this crumbling, and also completely just undermining my mom, and like requesting her not to attend church anymore, which is absurd to me. And so I kind of backed off from my faith quite a lot at a young age, teenage years, because I was angry. I'm like, if this is a representation of who Christians are, and what God's love looks like, I don't want to be a part of that. That's no. Um, and then kind of around this time of, realizing I was making bad decisions in my early 20s, and is it getting me to this point that I want to get to? I went on this faith journey again, and I joined a church in Stellenbosch. And some Christians will talk about this moment that they had where they got saved. Often, when I hear preachers talking, they remember the date, the time, the everything that was around them, the clothing they were wearing. And I don't believe I had a specific moment like that where I got saved. But there was one night in church, in this church in Stellenbosch, um, that something shifted for me spiritually, absolutely. And it's almost like I just recommitted my life to the Lord, and recommitted everything that I was doing. And it's not to say that from that moment life has been great. It just went up from there. Like, there were a lot of like hills and ups and downs. And I'm still human. Like, I still make human choices and decisions and go through human emotions. But um, I definitely had a base, and I decided to get baptized in when I was 21 years old. And yeah, and that was a special moment. But again, it's something that I think is sometimes taught in our faith, that you come up from the water and your sin and everything is washed away. And I agree fully, but it does not mean that life is, sunshine and flowers after that. Like, there's still really hard things that you go through, um but you have a base of like hope, and where life and peace lives. And that's what my faith is to me. It's um I mean, even currently I'm going through something that, it's wild and it's hard, and you kind of just don't know where to turn. And that's where I just turn back to my faith, and I'm just like, hey Lord, like, I don't know how to do this, so just help me through it. And yeah, there's just there's been too many things that I believe a lot of people will call a coincidence, or whatever everyone else might think that there's too many interventions in my life personally that I believe God has played a bigger role than any human or any kind of supernatural understanding could comprehend.
No, I think that's a great testament. And I think the great thing about what you went through in the early age is that to realize that the church is not God is actually quite a profound thing to penny to drop, because that is often the two are often confused, and I think that's a fantastic message to send out. That
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many, I mean, we're seeing it now, so many pastors and leaders in the church that are, you know, that are really struggling in their leadership, and it's being exposed on a platform that is quite scary, actually. And so, yeah, I think it's been a good reminder for all of us that we're not here to worship people or people on stages or pedestals. Like, I respect leaders in the church, absolutely, but we answer to God. That's who we answer to.
you hinted towards it in our sort of in the intro, where you said that the world has become quite shallow, or is quite shallow, and I fully agree with you on that. Um, and you play I mean, you play an important role in terms of as a role model to, I think, to young girls and young mothers. So if you have to pinpoint maybe why you think it's become so shallow, why do you think we're struggling with depth? Um, Not only in South Africa, I think it's a global phenomenon. But
Mm.
what would your views be on that?
I think the first word that comes into my mind, addressing this shallowness of the world is, and especially among women, is probably comparison. Um, and it's not because it's an individual decision. It's not like we wake up every morning and think, hey, I'm going to compare myself to 10 other women. It's what's created in marketing material, it's what's created on social media, it's what's created by societies, it's what's created in communities, in families. So it's it's almost become a just a pandemic of its own, just the amount of comparison that happens among people. And actually, I think definitely adds to the shallowness of where we kind of sit as human beings in this day and age. And um, I mean, I'm raising a teenager now and a young adult, and just to hear their experiences. Social media wasn't really a big thing when I was in my teens. So I actually only joined Facebook for the first time after I'd finished matric, and I'm very active on social media now. And if I had to try and imagine managing social media as a teenager, I just can't comprehend, what that would have been like. And it's so interesting now seeing it through, Lepelo and Liema and just their experiences of it. And I mean, it's often quite, it's quite dangerous because it's actually becoming um, it's almost shaping young adults' way of thinking to the point where um, I felt that a lot of our development, a lot of what we believed in as individuals happened, in our teenage years and our young adult years. And, and then you almost have this like foundation that you've started with. And now because social media is always changing and then you're influenced by something, and it's almost just completely swaying these young adults foundations, I guess. And so we have a rule at home actually that the kids can't be on social media until they're 16. And everybody's got their own way of dealing with this, and I respect everybody's decisions. But for us, we've decided no phones until 13, no social media until 16. And simply because I just think like kids need to have the opportunity to just believe what they believe is right with with how they're raised and with their experiences. without it being consumed by social media and millions of other people's opinions of what should be done, what should be addressed, what should be said, when it should be said. So yeah, it's a complicated thing, but comparison is, well, it's just straight from the devil, honestly.
Well, I think you raise some valid points. What I appreciate about your social media feed, and I've been just in researching the interview, is that I see you make a point of not always posting the best pics and you post do social media posts in the morning when you wake up and struggling with weight. I mean, these are real problems. So I appreciate that the angle that you're taking on that, because so many youngsters do take their cues from it. It was interesting. I was in the US recently, and at a sort of a consumer health conference, and it's the one in. I mean, the stat is 1 in 3 Americans, including a lot of children and teenagers, are on antidepressants, and 1 in 3 children and adults are on anti-anxiety meds.
Is that not that's just devastating? Oh,
So 2 out of 3,
devastating.
and one somebody made the comment that on the one hand, depression is the fear to live, and anxiety is to a large degree post COVID is the fear to die. So between those two things, to a large degree, social media is enhancing that, and it's to your point that the comparison that my life is not good enough, and I'm not good enough, and then there's this move away from anything spiritual towards the material and to science, and science is being used to a large degree as something that's taken people away from it. So I think it's commendable what you're doing and how you're going about your social media feed. I think it's an important angle to take and an important statement to make.
Yeah. I think I've realized that Brené Brown teaches, the power of vulnerability so well, and I'm obsessed with her. But I've realized that there's a lot more power. There's a lot more, I just like reaction from people being able to relate to your vulnerability than there is to posting like a perfect pic of, or what's deemed a perfect pic of like a full face makeup and your body looking a certain way and whatever. Like that, that's not, I think people are actually moving away from that because it's too much, and it's fake and it's not real, and um, so there's a lot more power, I believe, in vulnerability. As hard as it is sometimes to be vulnerable, there's a lot more that can come from that than I think is spoken about.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. But I think it does take a fairly high degree of maturity and of self-awareness to get to that point. And often when you're a teenager and 14 to 21, 22, you don't have that. So that's where I think the messages that people like you send out is so important.
Yeah.
And on the topic of vulnerability, I want to maybe just digress a little bit. So I mean, so you come from a home where your parents divorced. Um, and I mean, the stats again of South African kids, 60% of kids are growing up without a father. So fatherless homes is a significant problem. And it varies between the various ethnic groups, but I think specifically, and we're going to talk about your and Sia's relationship as well in the Black community. That is a very big problem, and I'm involved with 1 or 2 charities that specifically focuses on that. But maybe give us a bit of perspective around how that influenced you. I mean, at what age did you go through a divorce, and how did? I mean, like, you've discussed what the influence on your faith, but how did it influence you as a person,
Yeah.
and how did it influence your views? Where you now also have a big family, but you now have the ability to break that legacy. So, how do you? What was the influence that it had on you?
Yeah. So I think divorce has become quite underestimated, and the impact of divorce has become quite underestimated because, everywhere you look and turn, marriages are just breaking, um, and it's almost become like I'm not happy, so there's just some conversations that I've had with people that, it's just I'm not happy, so I've decided to leave for my happiness and grow the person I want to be, or pursue what I want to pursue. And again, there's no judgment, at all. Everybody's got their decisions, and I'm sure, I don't live in anybody's house and I'm not in anybody's marriage, but um, I'm very much of the opinion that, and this is for myself, I've made a commitment not only to this individual but to my family as well, and also to my future. And again, like it takes a constant, I think, decision just to, I'm going to keep at it. But it's quite dangerous how easy it is um just to give up and stop. um and not to say that that's without good reason. I was 14 when my parents got divorced, and it's probably one of the most complicated times. I've just gone through year 14 and 15 with Lipelo, and I just want to say to anybody listening, if you're currently raising toddlers and you think it's challenging, or you've got a baby that's teething or not sleeping, it gets really great for a few years, but then the teenage years comes and it's really, 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 really hard again.
Small problems,
Um,
big problems. That's the
oh my
same.
gosh, it's so hard. It's so hard. And there's not a lot of community around raising teenagers. So, sometimes I don't even know how or where to speak about it, because I'm like, holy heck, this is crazy. It's like being on a roller coaster every day.
You know the joke about why Abraham wanted to offer Isaac on the altar is because he was a teenager.
I haven't heard that one, but it makes sense. But yeah, no, it's wild. Teenage years are wild, and yeah, it's. I think for me at 14, it was a very complicated time already, with puberty kicking in and all of these changes happening in my body and my emotions, and then it also wasn't a very just the way that they dealt with it as individuals. It was very dramatic, and so it was often coming home from school, from like a long day of school, and then just, I'm looking for divorce papers and I'm done. And it was quite a traumatic thing as a teenager to come home, and that's your home environment. So I spent a lot of time at friends' houses and stuff just to try and stay away. But it really was traumatic, and just the way they dealt with it, I do believe that there's better ways, and I hope, people with children that are going through divorce try and choose ways that are most beneficial to themselves as individuals, but to their children as well. um, and yeah, I fell into a deep depression at 14, and at 15 tried to commit suicide. And it actually, to kind of get out of this dark hole that I was in as a teenager, I spent some time at an orphanage in Cape Town. And that experience forever changed my perspective on life, and tough situations, because sometimes I think it requires us to kind of step out of the situations we might be in and just have perspective of what certain situations look like for some people that live down the road from us sometimes.
And how has that influenced your approach to your kids and your family?
Yeah, so actually, one of the first things that we've started doing is, there was never I don't ever remember as a child like hearing adults speaking about marriage as a challenge or it being hard sometimes. You just saw adults as being married, and that was, that was that. Everything is great, and then they get divorced, and you're like, whoa, why? Like, where's this coming from? And so we very open with our kids about, we don't carry on in front of them, but we're very open about like marriage being challenging and sometimes us not disagreeing. And so they might hear us argue, and by no means you will step into our household and Siya and I are just like best friends all day. Like, we have a solid good fight every now and then. And sometimes, the kids will hear it, but we also make sure that they see us reconciling after a fight. So it's okay if they have been exposed to us having an argument, but it's important for us for them to see the part where we reconcile again. And
Real, just being re-
yeah,
for them to see that you're human and that you have faced challenges and that it's that you don't have all the answers.
totally. And also just that it's hard. It's really hard, living with another person and just doing life with them every day. So yeah, it's just important that they understand that to try and prepare them for when it comes around.
Yeah, I think that's a great message, and I think it's a great message that you're sending out. You spoke about Brené Brown and the power of vulnerability. I think it's an important message to send out. I mean, people would look at you and look at Siya, and often you are idolized. And I think that is an important message to send out: is that the road to get to wherever you want to get to is not easy, and there are massive bumps in it. So yeah, kudos that you're sharing that story. So maybe let's move on to where you and Siya met each other. So that's an interesting story in itself. So maybe give us a bit of perspective on how did you meet, and how did the relationship develop? And at what stage in your lives you met? Because and he was also quite early in his career, and I
Yeah.
think people underestimate that as well. So that give us a bit of perspective.
Yeah, so for me, it was in this stage where I had come to this decision that I needed to make some changes, and I actually cold turkey stopped drinking alcohol altogether, stopped going to clubs and some crazy environments. Um, and yeah, so I was well on the trajectory for where I was wanting to get to. And I just remember Sia, wasn't in exactly the same space when we had met. He was still very much drinking and jolling and carrying on. And I often remember, because I have a younger sister, and we would all go out together for dinner or a lunch or something, and then land up at a club. But I would find a chair in the corner and just sit and and pay the bill at the end of the night and just wait for it to finish, and then drive everybody home. Um, but yeah, so we were just in completely different areas of our life. We met at a restaurant in Stellenbosch with a group of mutual friends, and just completely opposite ends. And I I remember that there was one night we went to a beer fest, and I got caught up and decided to drink that night, and we all went out, and it's a great night and a great memory, but it definitely was like it got I got back onto this, like, and this is a conscious decision that I made, at the time. I got back onto this partying and this drinking story again, and for a number of years. And I don't want it to sound like it was out of control at all. It was within reason. It wasn't wild, but yeah, it just was different to kind of where the journey was. But it's also an example of life just being life. That I was cold turkey not drinking. I was like doing great in my career. I had bought a first little car that wasn't a skadoink, and so everything on paper was setting me up for success. And and then I made some different decisions, and then life just looked a little different at the time. But just that there's seasons in life, and it's okay if you're not on the straight and narrow all the time. It's also okay to have fun.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys met in Stellenbosch, and at that stage, I mean, so you were building your career. Where was he in his career? Where was he in his sort of on his way to
can't
finding his?
I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but I think he had just made his Super Rugby debut. Um, but I had no idea that he was a professional rugby player. And that dinner that we had met at in Stellenbosch, my brother actually said to me, because growing up in Grahamstown, Graham College and Grey High School used to play each other quite regularly. And I've enjoyed rugby since I was a young girl. And so I was at all the rugby days. And my brother said to me that night, "Don't you remember him from school? He was like a prodigy at school. He was amazing." And I said, "Flip, man, I don't even remember him." So I think that's where it was. Either Curry Cup or had made his Super Rugby debut.
And what drew the two of you to each other? What were the characteristics in each other, and sort of the spark that ended up? Because I want to dig into the role that you guys are playing as a multiracial couple, and it's I think it's important to just sort of set up
Mhm.
discussion around sort of what drew the two of you together.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't answer for him, but for me, 100% his heart for human beings. And I remember I dated a lot of guys who, would get irritated by people living on the street, people begging at robots. And Siya was just never dismissive of anybody ever. And that for me was one of the most attractive traits about him, was that he always acknowledged people, and he always helped wherever he could.
Yeah. Okay. And then the relationship. How long were you guys together up to the point where you decided that you're going to try and make this permanent?
There's a lot of complicated in between all of that, but we were dating. We got married in 2016. So we were dating for about 4 or 5 years before we got married.
And let's dig in a little bit. I mean, it's interesting, sort of just looking at social media, and I remember post the World Cup as well, that both of you got a lot of criticism and negativity around the fact that you are a multiracial couple, both from black society as well as from white society.
Mm.
Um, and the great thing about the two of you is that that it's. I mean, you mentioned how difficult it is to be married. So not only is it difficult with people that are coming from exactly the same backgrounds as you. Now you have two people that come from different backgrounds and
Mm.
different racial groups. So maybe take us back to sort of to the decision. I mean, that was obviously a big decision as well, because when you date so long, you get to realize the differences at the
Mm.
best of to make the
Mm.
decision to say that these differences are minor towards the areas where we have a mutual value system and a mutual vision for the future. So take us through the decision, and then also what you guys have experienced both from black and white society since you made that decision.
Mm. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's there's obviously the difference in culture, and we just kind of when we dove in, and we just navigated as we went, and that's what we've been doing since. We just when there's different cultural conversations that come up, and different celebrations in our children's lives, and you know different events that happen, within the year, and as the kids are growing up, and something as simple as our wedding. There's different ways to do that culturally, and so we just kind of take it head on as they come up, because it's not really something you can plan for. You have different ways of doing life, and we've both just chosen to be flexible with one another and find what works best for us as a family. And then, yeah, we received tons of racism from many different people. Most of them were, fake accounts and stuff, and everybody's a keyboard warrior when, you can't track down who it is behind the keyboard. But it's very disappointing to see that a lot of people have not managed to move past race, and have not managed to move past all racism, actually. And it's, even today, the other day, I received a comment, and it's not from a fake account, but from a white woman. So it just never fails to boggle my mind why it's such an issue for people. But I think just a stance that we've decided to take is just, how other people feel about our relationship is none of our business. They don't know us. They don't spend time with us. And you know what? Honestly, if racism is a way that you are going to navigate life, then kudos to you. All the best.
Look, I think you guys play a fantastic role in bringing, South Africa, being the rainbow nation that is, together, sending a wholesome message to society at a time when we know that racism is to a large degree being driven by the politicians, because it buys votes.
Well,
But
I might disagree on a couple of points there. One being Rainbow Nation. We should be a Rainbow Nation. We definitely are not yet. We're a Rainbow Nation for a significant group of individuals, but for a significant group of South Africans, it's definitely not rainbow. And I don't know that racism is mainly driven by government, or, I think it's every individual.
I know, and it is systemic, and I think that's where I think you guys do play a fantastic role. Is that you're bridging a gap, and you are an example of how you can bridge a gap.
Mm.
But I think to a large degree, racism is often injected. I mean, people are not born racists; they are made
Yeah.
racists, and they're made racist
Yeah.
by family, by the media,
Yeah.
by politicians, by social media. So I think again, I think the role that you guys are playing is fantastic. And the question, I mean, does these things get to you? Do you Have you developed? I mean, you say you have a specific way of dealing with it, but do they sometimes get to you in terms of just the comments that are made?
Yeah, yes, yes, they definitely get to me, and over the years, I've obviously built a thick skin, and yeah, just people who are racist, I would never add to my circle. And so again, if that's how you want to do life, then that's miserable, and I'm so sorry for you. Um, but yeah, any negative comments, and it's doesn't have to be solely towards racism, but just negative comments, I think, are so, you see it on Twitter. It's kind of it's a dog show out there sometimes, and I just think we all need to learn to just be a bit kinder to one another.
But I think you're a person of keyboard warriors. It's very easy to send something derogatory on a an electronic message. It's much more difficult to do that in person. I think if we go about the life with the rule that if you can't say something to somebody's face, you shouldn't be saying it on electronic media. But unfortunately,
Absolutely.
that's not the way that society operates. So moving a little bit to, and I think this, the context you've given us has been fantastic in terms of understanding how, what your formative events and years were all about. And you mentioned Sia's approach to people and to, and to people in need. And from there, let's maybe dig a little bit into the Kolisi Foundation. Sort of what was the spark around that, and sort of what is the focus of the Kolisi Foundation, and what do you try to what are you trying to achieve with the Kolisi Foundation?
Yeah, so we, throughout the years in our individual capacities, Siya and I have just been doing a number of different things, not significant things in any way, shape, or form, but just assisting and helping where we were able at the time. And before the World Cup final, we had put our kids to bed and just sat and thought about, what we wanted to do with the victory in 2019. And we made a little list and realized that we would need a vehicle for everything that we wanted to achieve, and that was essentially a foundation. We had no idea where to start, but had some great guidance from a number of different individuals on the journey, and obviously just dived right in at the beginning of COVID in 2020. And it's been such an incredible journey. We've just recently celebrated our 3rd birthday. And it's just been such an incredible learning experience, I think, for us. But just seeing this organization grow as organically as it had, but also just with such an intention to make sure that we're constantly learning from people. We just don't believe we have the right to go into different communities in South Africa with things that we believe we can fix and do. We really need to create strong relationships with individuals working in their communities and understand what the need is and where we can best support. There's also tons of amazing grassroots level organizations that are working with very minimum resource that we've been really fortunate to partner with and amplify the work that they're doing and continue to support the work that they're doing, and actually be able to grow it to a bigger level, which is really amazing. So we've spent a lot of time recently mapping out the strategy for the foundation and also just understanding the heart of it. And I think what's been really helpful in doing that is Sia's recently launched his documentary, and that really gives a clear picture of what the majority of South Africans are experiencing on a daily basis, and where we wanted to address issues in South Africa. And we've pinpointed gender-based violence, food security, and education and sports development. And that's simply because that was Sia's lived experience. And so we've really just taken his learnings and, individuals that are currently living in similar situations and developed the work and the programs of the foundation.
Okay, and then the approach is to support organizations that are already working in those areas, or have you spearheaded some new initiatives, or is it more a support strategy, if I read between the lines?
No, we have created our own programs in all 3 of the focus areas. And then we do have horizontal learning experience, as well as facilitating capacity building for grassroots level organizations. So no, we have our own programs, but we do also support grassroots level organizations as well. Okay. But not to create dependency on us as an organization. And this is something that we are, it's something that we constantly thinking about as well, is also just making sure that we don't want to be dependent on anybody, and we don't want anyone dependent on us as the organization. And so that's why we put a lot of work and resource into facility and facilitating capacity building with grassroots level organizations, because we want them to be able to continue the work within their own capacity.
You mentioned education, so is that a big focus around? Because I mean, looking at our landscape of education, it is quite abysmal. So I would
Yes,
assume
it
that is
is. Yeah, so education and sports development falls into one of the pillars, and absolutely is a big focus at this stage. It's more at I want to say like pre-grade, so like grade R, pre-grade one level, so and then primary school. But we've got a lot of tutoring support as well as supporting a lot of ECD centers with food security as well.
yeah. No, that early stage childhood development is critical. That's
It's
where
been super interesting, understanding the development of a child's brain as well. And if a child is malnourished, how that affects, their ability to learn as well, which is why, the three focus areas that we have, gender-based violence will affect a child's ability to learn. Food security will affect a child's ability to learn. And so it's interesting how the three focus areas, we've actually gone from realizing they're not three separate conversations. They're actually all in one conversation, and can be addressed at the same time. So we've got a phenomenal program that we've started in Zweden where Siya grew up, called Siya Pakama, and we are working with 6 schools within a 3-kilometer radius in Zweden. And yeah, it's been so helpful having the structure that's already existed within a school system, but being able to support it a little bit more from all three of the focus areas.
yeah, yeah. I think in terms of schools, there's a lot that can be done through existing schools like Partners for Possibility, or Partners with Business, and school
Yeah,
principals, and a number of other initiatives. Sort
absolutely.
of moving towards a little bit longer term. Um, so the foundation is fantastic. The work that you're doing there. I know judging from what you said earlier, you have a passion for business as well.
Yeah.
And the thing about sports stars is their sports careers have a limited life expectancy. So, what is
Mm.
the vision for you guys as a team, and for yourself, in terms of what happens post rugby? What happens from 40 onwards?
Yeah, I think there's a limit to that explanation that I can give, but the fact that a sports career is very short is something that we are very, very aware of, and which is why we've made the decision not to live outside of our means and make sure that it's something that's sustainable. We also have a phenomenal team of people that just advise all the decisions that we make, and yeah, just making conscious effort to make the opportunities that we receive now more long-term opportunities. So yeah, we've put a lot of thought and a lot of effort into making sure that our kids are able to go to good schools and good universities, and yeah, that we're just able to continue to support a number of our family and friends, and yeah, just making sure that we also are able to sustain a certain level of living.
Yeah, and all these plans and the foundation, and with your relocation to France, that's now pretty much a done deal. So, how's the French coming? Can you say
Not not
a
great,
few lines for us already?
not great, but I recently spent a few days there, and trying to find schools for the kids in a house, and it's a daunting task at the moment, but the club that Sia is going to has been really supportive and helpful, and it's yeah, there's some people that would give anything for an opportunity like this. To be able to just uplift and go live in Europe for a few years is really such a privilege, and so as unideal as it is at the moment, it is something that we are looking forward to just grabbing the opportunity with both hands, and inviting many people in Europe to come and experience South Africa and everything South Africa's got to offer. Um, and yeah, just being good ambassadors for our country, and for our kids to be able to have such an experience is phenomenal. And yeah, everything in Europe is kind of a stone throw away. So yeah, it's an incredible opportunity, and we're just choosing to be really positive about it.
I think it will be a great adventure. I think that's, like you say, that's most people's dream to live in Europe for a couple of years. Sort of starting to take our conversation, to a close. I mean, you we spoke about your role that you're playing to women and young mothers in South Africa. Where do you draw your inspiration from? Who do you mentioned Brené Brown? So by the sounds of it, that's one of them. But give us some ideas around where do you find your inspiration and wisdom from?
Um, I would love to have this long list of like phenomenal, powerful females doing amazing things. But I really don't. I often just find it in different places. I enjoy listening to podcasts. I enjoy just actually having a little bit of peace and quiet with my own thoughts sometimes, which actually, like, I think we don't make enough effort to do that. It's just a full day of work, and then it's dinner and bath time and homework time, and then you just want a minute to yourself to watch a series for a few hours and then go to bed. And we just we just don't make time for ourselves anymore. And um so yeah, I draw a lot of inspiration from a number of different places. But sometimes just actually getting through something really hard, and then just like flip, like, you did that really well, or you were terrible with that, like, how can you do that better next time? And actually just spending some time thinking about like my life and my experiences, and sharing that. And that's again where this vulnerability thing comes in, is I'm willing to be vulnerable if it means that it's helping somebody else. And it brings a sense of freedom for other people as well. Like, I shared a lot about my weight journey as well, and it's constantly fluctuating. Like, I'm not at a point where I'm constantly always happy, but it's I think because, like, you know weight loss among women, and just weight journeys and stuff is such a massive industry on its own. um, Sometimes it's just nice to hear that someone else is going through something challenging that you might be going through as well, and sharing just their journey and how they kind of manage through it.
Yeah, no, and I think coming back to how you go about that is, I think, fantastic, and it really it shows your human side, and what you've shared with us has been fantastic, and it's you've been vulnerable, and we thank you for that, and the message that you're sending out of that we're all human, that we're all fighting a hard battle,
Yep.
and that life has its ups, but it also has its downs, and it's about putting your head down and realizing that that there will be a tomorrow, and there's great things ahead.
No, it's just, yeah, absolutely. And I think that if we, as challenging as things get sometimes, no matter what space it's in, like, if we live without hope, then life is going to get really, really, really hard. So draw hope from somewhere. Just figure out what that looks like for you, but draw hope from somewhere.
And I think that's a great message to end this podcast with. And we thank you for your candidness and for sharing your life with us. And we wish you all the best in France. Good luck with the French lessons. Um, the French are not nearly as difficult to deal with as they say they are. So you'll find them actually quite
I
friendly.
appreciate that you say that, actually, because I heard really negative things, and I've only had really good experiences so far. So I'm sure there will be some challenges along the way, but yeah, that's great. Very good.
We're rooting for both of you. Thank you for the work that you're doing in South Africa. Thanks for the role that you're playing. Thank you for the great bridge that you're providing. And we wish you all the best. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and yeah, just continue the great work as well. I think it's important to hear from different individuals and kind of how they're doing life and navigating their professions. So thank you so much for creating the space.
Thank you for spending the last hour with us. Don't forget to subscribe for new episodes and other content, and remember to share any feedback on shaperspodcast.co.za. We'd love to hear from you. Should you have any questions, you'll find my details on the website. Until next time, cheers.